Hello everyone, this is Jason as Dr. Gaming Plays, and what I want to talk about in this video is my own pile of shame of JRPGs and other role-playing games that have been in my collection but I haven't gotten to various reasons. Before we begin, I want to give a special shout out to FemTrooper who put out a video a few weeks ago along the lines of a similar topic, and I'm going to put a link to that video in the description below. Also, if you do like this video, please hit that like button, and if you're new to this channel, please subscribe as well. Anyways, without further ado, let's get right into it. Now, before I get into the list, I just want to talk about some of the ground rules I laid out for this video to maybe make it a little bit different from other videos that are out there. And so one of the ground rules is I actually have to have owned the console at the time of the release, and the game had to be in my collection during the time that I had the console. So that's going to rule a lot of things out. You're not going to see any handheld games in this video because I didn't get a 3DS and Vita until 2019. They weren't part of my original collection, and they didn't really start to pick up some games until recently. Also, while I could have added Super Nintendo games to this list, I actually sold off my Super Nintendo collection a long time ago. I've since reacquired some of those games in the past few years, but they can't make the list because it's not my original console and I don't have my original copy of games. As for reasons why we get games into these piles of shames or mound of guilt or whatever you want to call them, it's due to a variety of reasons. One is we could be new consoles come out and we're kind of distracted by the next new thing and don't have really just games that were for the old console. Maybe they just kind of don't pay attention to them as much, for that reason. And there could be other like really bigger life-changing reasons too. We could be transitioning into a new job, or suddenly you have a new kid and you just don't have time to really play the game that time, and when time frees up later, you really don't think of necessarily going back to it. So as to why some of these games have made this list, a couple of other things to mention. Some of them do have a little bit of interesting story, and also some of these games may not necessarily be the best game for that console or one of the top AAA games necessarily, but I bought them for a reason because I intended to play them, but just didn't get to it. And lastly, one other thing I want to bring up, there won't be any PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X games on this list because those consoles are too new. Anyways, on to the first game. First up on the pile of shame is, we're going to go back all the way to the PlayStation 1, and it's going to be Lunar 2 Eternal Blue. So as for why this game is on the pile of shame, I have to actually back up a little bit to the first Lunar game. So back in 1999, Working Designs released an official translation of Lunar the Silver Star story, and some of the things that really made it exciting and appealing to me at the time were, we've got these anime for video in it and voice acting, and it was really exciting. While we have those kinds of things with the Sega CD and TurboGrafx 16, for some of us that could have been our first exposure to it. I enjoyed that game up until the very end, and in that game the last boss levels up with you. So if you grind a lot and if you miss a certain object at the end of the game, you'll actually find the last boss nearly impossible to beat, even though these games are not really that difficult. At some point a year or two later, I don't remember exactly when the release date was, it was either my wife or my mother-in-law that picked up a copy of Lunar 2 Eternal Blue for me, because they knew, at least were aware that I liked the first game, although they weren't aware of why I rage quit that one. So that was one of the reasons I didn't get into Lunar 2 Eternal Blue, because I was still feeling burned by the first game. And also the other reason is I was a fairly young postdoc, and in the field I was in, it's not uncommon to have to work over 80 hours a week. It was just something that everybody did, and it was what it was expected of you. So I didn't really have a time to play a lot of JRPGs, and also on the horizon was the PlayStation 2. So this game, Lunar 2 Eternal Blue, has sat in my collection ever since the early 2000s. Anyways, let's get to the next game on my list. Okay, for the second game on my pile of shame, it is Valkyrie Profile 2 for the PlayStation 2. Now, as for why I didn't get into this game, I had finished up my first postdoc, and I was actually on the second one, which wasn't quite as hours intensive. So I did have some more time to play games, but at that time I kind of had started to drift away from playing JRPGs, and I was playing more action games, more platformers. At least in my collection of PS2 games at the time, they did outnumber the JRPGs. And the JRPGs I did play back then, Final Fantasy X, Kingdom Hearts, and so, for whatever reason, this game just fell off my radar. I didn't get to it, and it has sat on my shelf ever since it was released. So it's still my original copy, and I still have that PlayStation 2, which still works to this day. And from the things that I've seen of it, I'm kind of surprised I didn't get back into it when I was younger, because I was into a lot of classic literature and Greek and Norse mythology. I really love that stuff. And also being an action JRPG, it probably would have been something I would have enjoyed more at the time. And me of today, there's no reason why I wouldn't like to play this game, but I don't know when I'm going to get to it. I have every intention to, so we'll just see what happens. But this next part of this video, I'm actually going to bring up two games in my pile of shame, mostly because of the reasons I didn't get to them are fairly similar. So the first game is Disgaea D2: A Brighter Darkness. Now, back in the PlayStation 2 era, I really enjoyed the first Disgaea game. The Puzzle Tactics, I think, was in the same genre, and it wasn't really big into strategy role-playing games, but it was just that line that I really liked. I kind of liked the nonsensical humor and that sort of thing. So picking up a sequel to one of my favorite PlayStation 2 games was pretty much a no-brainer. But I intended to get to it, and other things came up, which I will get into, where it just has sat in my pile to this day. So the other game that I want to bring up is The Last Story for the Nintendo Wii. So this was another game that was right up my alley. It's an action JRPG, and one of the reasons why I got it was I did want to play it, but I also kind of wanted to send Nintendo a message at the time, because we had the Nintendo 64, which didn't have a lot of JRPGs. We had the Nintendo GameCube, which had a few, but not many, and the Wii, there's was really a dearth of them. So I want to make sure I purchase this game to be someone that says, hey, Nintendo, we want to see more JRPGs on your next console. Which, I guess that didn't exactly happen, did it? In any event, the big reasons why I didn't get into these games was just life transition at the time. I was now raising, with my wife, 2 kids. I was involved in coaching 2 soccer teams, refereeing soccer games, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and of course my full-time job. I was really busy, and again went through a period where I wasn't really playing many JRPGs. So that's the big reason why I didn't get to them. And by the time more time freed up for me, we had the PlayStation 4. I started getting back into JRPGs then. I just didn't really go back to play these games. Anyways, let's move on to the next game on my list. Anyways, for the next game in my pile of shame, I don't have really great reasons as why I didn't get to it, although it may have been due to a misunderstanding. But the next game is Xenoblade Chronicles X for the Nintendo Wii U. Now, I did get the first Xenoblade Chronicles game for the Wii U, and I actually could have added that to this list as well, but that actually would have made 3 titles from Monolith Soft, and I don't want to make them feel too bad. But in any event, one of the reasons I did get this game is, again, I thought it was a sequel or related somehow, which it really isn't, but at least at the time I did. And again, I was still trying to send Nintendo a message, give us some more role-playing games on these Nintendo consoles. I guess another reason why I didn't get into Xenoblade Chronicles X is I also had a PlayStation 4 and was much more into that console. Starting to get into JRPGs again as well, but for some reason just didn't get back to playing this game because I thought I had to play the first one for the Nintendo Wii. So anyways, let's get on to the next game. The next game on my pile of shame is not a JRPG, but it is a role-playing game, and it is Witcher 3: The Wild Hunt. So I don't have any really good reasons as to why I haven't gotten into this. I mean, I like the books, I like the Netflix series. There's a lot that's, in this game that I think I would like, and it's gotten rave reviews. The only thing I can think of for me not getting into it is, at the time, I started getting into some other series for the PlayStation 4 and for the Nintendo Switch, and it just, again, fell by the wayside. And to be honest, I don't really play my Xbox One X all that much. And so, again, while I've been mostly focused on the PlayStation and Switch consoles for playing role-playing games, I think, again, The Witcher 3 is actually somewhat higher on the list than some of these other games that I mentioned, and I'd like to get to it. I didn't really at the beginning of the year make it a pledge game for myself, but maybe that's something I will do for next year. But if you've got any reasons why I should move it up on the list sooner, please leave them in the comment section below. Okay, the last two games for this list are real heavy hitters. Kind of disappointed in myself for not getting into them. Okay, the second to last game on this list comes from a series that I know a lot of you really, really enjoy and love. But it is Xenoblade Chronicles 2 for the Nintendo Switch. Or is it Xenoblade? I don't know. I've heard it both ways. But again, one of the reasons why I didn't get into it was, at the time, I was under the misconception that I really had to play the first game on the Nintendo Wii. The definitive edition hadn't come out yet. And also Xenoblade Chronicles X on the Wii U to really understand what was going on. So it kind of just really intimidated me. I realized that, at least for X, I didn't really need to play that game first. But it's really the only reason I can think of, because, the whole Xeno series, from Xenogears from PlayStation 1, and the Xenosaga games for the PlayStation 2, I really enjoy these games. And, there's a few others you mentioned that, those games kind of maybe changed the way you looked at certain things, and they're certainly influential. So I'm actually kind of disappointed in myself for not getting into the Xenoblade Chronicles games sooner. And while I didn't make a beginning of the year video of the games I pledged to us get into, that is one of the pledges to myself, to at least start with the definitive edition of Xenoblade Chronicles and just kind of take it from there. Or should I do that? Because, well, the last game on this list is a pretty big heavy hitter as well. For the last game in my pile of shame, and it's a heavy hitter, it's Final Fantasy VII Remake for the PlayStation 4. And a lot of you are probably going like, why haven't you gotten into that yet after all this time? Well, when it came out, it was 2020. Of course, that was the start of the pandemic, and you can easily think to yourself, like, well, you should have had time. Well, at that time, my games I was playing during the shutdown were all the Kingdom Hearts games, Tales of Xillia 1 and 2 for the PlayStation 3. So I didn't make time for it at the time. And in 2021, I became aware of the Trails series, which I've really gotten into. So it just, again, sat on my shelf. And I actually do have Rebirth as well. I picked that up on release date, actually. So I have both of these games, back to back that I could play. So here are some closing thoughts about this pile of shame. Look, I know a lot of us have these. We have these games in our list that we haven't gone into, and actually, in reality, I don't think we should even really feel guilty that we haven't gotten into something. Again, because it's likely due to life circumstances, or maybe, we're into something else. I sometimes people hear themselves say, I must be a fraud because I haven't played this game, and I kind of hope they're joking, because you really shouldn't consider yourself that. So anyways, those are my final thoughts. If you have games in your pile of shame, please list them in the comment section below. And I have another question for you. So again, at the beginning of the year, I pledged to start Xenoblade Chronicles, at least with the very first game, the definitive edition. I don't have time to both get into Xenoblade and the Final Fantasy VII games. So should I change my mind? Should I make the Final Fantasy VII games something that I should get into much sooner? Why don't you give me your answer in the comments section below. Anyways, everybody, please take care of yourselves. Have fun playing games, and I will see you next time. Bye bye for now.